just my background, so you can see that. I think that's important to show transparency of where I've been and my certifications. Next slide. Throughout this presentation, you will see dates with parentheses and stars by them with MSEP 6. So that's the Missouri School Improvement Program. These are the Missouri standards as far as safety, section L10. This is important that we stay beyond reproach when it comes to safety and security. So we want to make sure that we're keeping up with the state standards, and that's one of the biggest things that that I stress upon, and I try to make sure that we're in compliance with state certifications. So that first one you'll see up there, CES, Missouri School Safety Specialist. So this is a state requirement that all security directors, security coordinators, SROs, 2020, we're all certified and qualified by the state of Missouri. So we don't want to just stop right there. So this is a state certification. So we have a security staff as well, which is most of our security staff is retired St. Louis County, St. Louis City, and former fire marshals. So we want to in turn make sure that those guards have this certification as well. So this summer, this August, we'll have our whole security staff certified in Missouri School Safety Specialists. Next, no, go back, column. Next bullet point here, Regional Safety Liaison, Region C. So I am part of the MSBA Missouri Regional Safety Liaison for safety directors. So why is that important? So we're getting direct information from the Missouri School Board on how to keep our schools safe. So that's very important, because what I do is take that information back, and then I actually chair an actual area safety and security coordinators for St. Louis County schools. So that's valuable too, because we're sharing information and intel, and then I'm also bringing it back from the state level, but then also able to inflect information around for our area schools as well, as we share information. That's vital to safety and security. Next slide, Colin. It's all about empowering yourselves with knowledge. I retired from the Navy in 2013, and in the Navy, I don't know if you all know it or not, everyone is designated as a firefighter. So how that relates to this scenario, each and every one of us, the community, the staff, every surrounding law enforcement, we're all part of school safety. Everybody is a safety professional. It doesn't just have to be Terrell Baker saying that, hey, we need to do these things and do these things, but it's everybody's responsibility. And what I want to do is empower people with knowledge. I'm a big supporter and motivator when it comes to safety training. So you'll see those in the next slide of things that I'm doing for the district. Next slide. Go ahead. All right, so 2019, I came on board and I was hired. This is a MSEP 6 requirement. In 2019, Lindbergh Schools had already surpassed that and is in compliance with the state mandate. So I was hired on in 2019. Dr. Lake came to me and said that, we want to implement a crossing guard program. So I want crossing guards at each one of our schools. So as we look at safe walking zones and kids coming to school with bikes and making sure that they're crossing safely, we completed that and we've obtained that now. Each and every one of our schools has a crossing guard, and I'm always recruiting, but this is a standard that we placed out, and then we continue to do that to have a safe walking zones. Establish a visitor management system. So this is a standard that we had way back before I came in 2018. So this actual program allows us to check visitors against the National Registry. So the system that we use is called Badge Pass. Some schools will use Raptor. They're all pretty much the same, but this is a tool that we use here. We've had it since 2018 and been in compliance with MSEP 6 requirements. Not only does this check against the National Registry, each visitor is required to show their driver's license as they come into the buildings, come through our security vestibules, and show that to the front office staff. From that, it's an access management piece. We're actually able to pinpoint and actually see who's and account for people that are in our building, visitors that are in our buildings. It'll print off a name tag. Those individuals are escorted to their destination or their appointments, whether it's a contractor or someone just coming up for a visit with a counselor or parent. Or this is how we're able to track people in our building, visitors in our buildings. So we've had this standard since 2018. Next slide. Single point entry security vestibules. You know that all of our schools have a security vestibule, and we're actually, we're doing construction on the high school, but we want to take it a step further. We want to be in compliance with national standards. So not just having a security vestibule, but looking at having transaction windows, so that way we don't have to have visitors come into our front office, but we're able to keep our staff safe and still do business. So all of our schools have that, a single point entry. We're in compliance with national standards. We look at having access to our schools with our local law enforcement. All of them have access to our schools, so that's never a question. So that's a big step in safety and security, and most school districts are just now complying with that, but we're actually doing it the right way with all these different measures. And then if there's any type of failures, we're able to get law enforcement or force responders still able to accomplish them getting into our schools. Emergency response plan. So before I came on board, we were in compliance and we had an emergency EOP plan. So the only thing that I actually did, it was a great plan. I just revised it and put it into FEMA response format. Because if there's a crisis incident, we respond in FEMA. We use NIMS. We use those particular procedures in response. So I just put it into the compliance with FEMA standards. But what I want to, anyone can create an emergency management plan, but how do I get that information from, being in compliance with the Missouri standards, but how do I get that? I don't expect the teacher to know all the acronyms and ins and out of an emergency operations plan. So how do I get that information for them to understand it easily? So we went a step further. We created flip charts for all of our classroom, for our teachers. In that flip chart is a pre-planned response programs, that pre-planned response procedures, which basically breaks down what their roles and responsibilities are in a crisis situation. I have about 21 different scenarios where principals, teachers, custodians, counselors, what they would have to do in specific type of emergency incidents that we have. PALS program, we partnered with St. Louis County PD to create the Police Athletic League. So the Police Athletic League is a way for officers to engage and bridge that gap between law enforcement and students. It's also our officers come into the school district. They're not in uniform, they're in athletic gear, and they're using sports to connect with our students. I love sports. I'm always at most of our sporting events. I'm a coach, so I absolutely love the PALS programs. So we're able to have an officer in our elementary, middle school, and high school settings. Just this past year, we've accomplished that. And it's another way for students to see law enforcement, not just in uniform, and another way to connect with them using sports. Next slide. So district-wide radio upgrade. This is essential in a crisis and emergency situation. Not all schools have this. I visit tons of schools throughout St. Louis County, and it's not a standard. It's a standard in Lindbergh School Districts. So I'm able to have my radio, my security radio, and I'm able to connect and talk to other schools in an emergency or crisis situation, and all of our schools are able to talk amongst each other. That is something that's not to be taken lightly. It's a standard that we have here, but not all schools have that. So I'm very proud of that, and it's another way of communicating in an emergency situation.
Who at the school has access to that radio system?
Say again?
Who at the schools has access to that radio system?
So all of the security staff, your SROs, but then inside of the school setting, your principals, your counselors, your front office staff. So those are the people that would have, custodians that would have access to talk back and forth between the school leadership and security. So that's a standard, and that's something that we absolutely need in a crisis situation. Going a step further, emergency paging system. This is a way we look at all of our staff being able to communicate. We have this system in place. Not all school districts have telephones in their classrooms. We have telephones in our classrooms. Teachers can actually use that paging system to alert staff or talk amongst staff. I'm able to sit at central office and execute, whether we have to do a lockdown or lockout situation. I'm able to talk to each and every one of those schools and make a loud response to them and get information to them. Like I'm able to sit from Central Austin and talk to each and every one of our schools. That's a standard not all schools have, and we have that in Lindbergh. The Regional Justice Information System, GPS 911 Analytics Alert Notification System. So this was a pilot that we had back in 2019 that Lindbergh, Melville, Jennings, and Brentwood have this system. So I'm able to get real-time alerts from St. Louis County, Sunset Hills, and Crestwood Dispatch Center. Why is that important? If we have a threat outside of the school, I'm able to get that alert. I can in turn communicate with our schools. If we have to put them on lockout or lockdown, that's immediate real-time information from our 911 system. Not all schools have this. At some point, it will be a standard for all schools, but this is something that we've had for the last 2 years. And when we look at those alerts, the alerts will go to your principals, your SROs, your security staff, and your leadership, your district leadership. So we're able to see that real-time information and then put in the proper response procedures. Next slide. So physical security assessments. This is an MSEP 6 requirement that we are in compliance with. This is one of the biggest things that I'm working on this summer. Each and every one of our schools annually is supposed to have a physical security assessment. So when we look at doing these physical security assessments, I use the RIMS TA, which is the Ready Information Management System that I'm able to do these assessments on. So annually, every summer I'll go through, and it's actually using subject matter experts, whether it's your IT, your facilities directors, it's all of us coming together, looking at what threats or what things we need to mitigate inside of our schools, and then sharing that information back out with leadership. So I'm actively working on that right now for all of our schools. And before school starts, I will have an assessment for all of our schools. So that is an MSEP 6 standard, and that's something that we are compliant with, and I'll have completed it here shortly. One of the biggest things when I came on board and I talked to Tara, what I wanted to accomplish was training for our staff. COVID slowed me down a little bit, but now I can successfully say that we've created a long-range training plan where we're going to actually conduct create an actual academy where we look at hands-on training for our staff. So that's real-time, in-person, in their schools, having their training. We're not going to a site, off-site. We're doing training inside their schools, which is important so that they know how to respond in their school setting. But we recruited some champions of safety. So we have on this training team, we have our local law enforcement, we have our teachers, SROs. They're all part of this training team, so we can in turn keep training our staff. So that's one of the biggest things that I want to accomplish here, and we're accomplishing that, and it is a MSEP 6 standard. When we look at preparedness of our drills, I'm always in communication with our principals before school starts. So we will have our drill schedule for each school. So when we look at 1 fire drill per month, 2 tornado drills per year, earthquake drills, and then 4 intruder drills. We're in compliance with that. Even in COVID, we're in compliance with that. Because when you look at doing it, we looked at doing tabletops, we looked at doing walkthroughs. So we were still in compliance, even though we weren't, like maybe face to face, but we were still in compliance with those state standards. And that's the success of like the leadership and training team and the law enforcement here to just continue doing that, and we still accomplish that through COVID. And so now we're back in full gear, and we can get our local law enforcement out to observe our intruder drills. We can get our fire marshals to observe our fire drills, and we're in compliance with that. Next slide. So one of the biggest things, we use the standard response protocol. So each and every one of our, when you look in our schools, when you look in our hallways and our classrooms, they'll have this standard response poster protocol. And one of the biggest things is just educating and having people understand that, what is a shelter-in-place event? What does that look like? What is a lockout? What is evacuate and a lockdown? What are the differences? Those are the terms that we use. So as part of that academy, we make sure that if we have any new teachers coming in, and we make sure that we're in compliance, that this information is sent out to everyone. And this information is in all of our classrooms and then in our hallways as well. So we know that shelter in place is always like a weather event. Lockout is there's an event that's happening outside of the school, so we'll have the kiddos come inside. We'll conduct business as usual inside of the schools, but no one enters or comes out of the school until we deem, or to law enforcement deem necessary that we are in a safe haven now. Evacuation, so we look at evacuating to rally points. We practice on that on most of all of our drill sets. And then lockdown is when we have a threat inside where we completely lock the school down. Next slide. So active drill response procedures. One of the biggest things, go to the next slide, Colin. One of the biggest things that I want to express is when we talk about rally points, and I haven't understood that rally points is just a temporary place when you evacuate out of the school. It's a way for once we're in that safe haven, we contact 911 and then we account for our kids. Reunification is places that we've partnered with, and we've have several in our area that mass gathering areas that it's a sheltered location that we have MOUs with, that in a crisis situation, they would stop shop and help us to reunify kids with their parents. And when we look at reunification, once law enforcement is on scene and setting the perimeter, and if we actually have to go into reunification, they will determine which location we will use for reunification. So one of the biggest things is just being in this position is our local partnerships with our local law enforcement, states, and federal. So a lot of them are represented here today, just in case you may want to ask them questions after this presentation. I just felt it necessary that you see, we have resources and help within the district when it comes to safety and security. So anything that I need as far as local, state, and federal, I'm always getting help from them. Next slide. So our SROs are partnered with St. Louis County, and in our jurisdiction we use Crestwood and Sunset Hills. Our security officers, again, are retired law enforcement, former fire marshals. And one of the biggest things just recently with these incidents that have happened, I want to point out our local response time. When we look in our jurisdiction, our local response time is 2 minutes and 39 seconds. That's getting the information out and getting to law enforcement and them actually responding to our schools to help us. The national average is 18 minutes. And that may seem a little bit long, but we're putting into context with rural areas, so it's always a time thing. So that is the national average. So we're way in front of that. And then also, each one of our local law enforcement have access to our schools. That's one of the biggest things that came out of Uvalde, access to schools. All of our law enforcement have maps to our schools. They actively come in and out of our schools. I share our EOP and flip charts and all of our safety stuff prior to school starting, so they have that information. So there's no questions when they have to respond. And all of them train and do walkthroughs, Lindberghs. Part of them, most of them are part of our training staff as well. Next slide. One of the things I already discussed is just being a Regional C safety liaison, and that's just bringing information. I believe in sharing information, and I've already talked about sharing, chairing actual security coordinators meeting every month with local schools. One of the biggest things that I talked with me and Beth, we talked with the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force, their academic outreach program. This is another resource for us to use in the case of a threat. This is another resource that would actively investigate threats for us, and it's another tool that we can use to get information back to our schools so we can investigate these threats. And that outreach program, they actually reached out to me, and then they actually want to create an actual working group of school SROs, security directors. We all want to create, so that way we have that direct intel from the FBI. So I think that's huge when it comes to intel for schools. Next slide. Courage to report. This is a state mandate, and we've been in compliance with Courage to Report for the last 3 years. It is an anonymous reporting tool that you can use to report bullying, threats, any threats to the school. This is law enforcement heavy, so this you're able to file reports that would get investigated by law enforcement 24/7. That information goes to law enforcement and then is shared with our district leadership and principals. So that way, in turn, we can see what the threat is. We can get information and intel back to us to see how we would proceed forward when receiving a threat. So this is a tool that I pass out at our board meetings just to get, when we look at information on this, it's information for parents, students, and staff. It's another resource that we can use to report threats. And this is a standard, and we've been in compliance with this. Next slide. So one of the biggest things that I went to, when I got hired on, I went to a safety and security conference, and I was able to meet with some representatives from Crisis Go. Crisis Go is a cloud-based two-way alert reporting system. This is a reporting system that all of our teachers, all of our staff, all of our district can use on their mobile devices, and we're able to communicate directly with law enforcement. Two-way communication. Sometimes you don't always have two-way communications in a crisis situation. So that's huge. We're able to do reunification with that program as well. So we're now piloted in Truman and Sappington, and I think this is a smart way the district is going about it. We're piloting in these two schools, getting feedback, see how it works, see what, working out the kinks, see what doesn't work. We get feedback to leadership. So that is a pilot program that we got going on right now at those two schools, and I'm hoping it goes well because I really, really like this tool. There's a couple school districts, our sister school districts that are using Crisis Go. So, next slide. Next slide. Next slide. We've already talked about that. All right. One of the biggest, and this is towards the end. MSEP 6 mandated training. We did a active shooter course for our bus drivers. That is not a standard for school districts. Not all school districts do that. When I tell you I'm a big proponent of like safety training, we had training with our first student bus drivers, and they just felt empowered. They felt they had safety information that they never had before. They had state statutes that back them of things that they can actually do in a crisis situation, things that they didn't know about before. So we had that training at Truman and at the high school June 24th, and it was well received. We just recently went through BRAT training, which is our behavioral risk assessment team training. Each and every one of our schools has a behavioral risk assessment team. So we got training from the Center for Education and Safety and the Cape Girardeau superintendent, which he's really good at what he does with behavioral threat assessments. So we just got some updated training for our team. And it's really just looking at the pathway to violence. It's getting information and intel that we need to respond, so that way we may not have to use law enforcement. It's getting our SROs, our social workers, our district leaderships together and working on creating solutions so we may not have to use any type of force or security or law enforcement. Look at those triggers. So that's one of the things that we just had that training. It was really great and really well received. Parents Night Out Safety Summit. If you guys can please research Michelle Gay, Katie McPherson, Michelle Gay, Safe and Sound Schools. She'll be one of our keynote speakers. Katie McPherson, Bark for Schools. We look at, so continuing on with this training, it's just getting information out. So I not only want to reach staff, I want to reach parents. I talk with parents all the time and just about safety things and safety procedures that we put in place. So I always have an open door policy, and I'm very transparent when talking with parents. So I do that all the time. So this is a night out for them. We'll have guest speakers, we'll have roundtables, we'll have local law enforcement, and we'll talk about things as far as social media threats, social emotional health. The following day, we'll have those keynote speakers in several breakout rooms for all of our staff. We'll have it here at the high school. And then, again, our Violence Prevention Academy. Next slide. And I just want to read this. A safety-minded community will make all the difference, empowering yourself with knowledge. I not only want you to be safe and have the information, I want you to be able to react in the situation, and I want you to take that knowledge not just in school, use it in your everyday life, because it's needed. It's needed out here. So that's all I have, unless you have any other questions for me.